I spent a good amount of time searching both old and new for the next experience that'll grab me, and when I first saw reviews of Severed, it immediately made an impression on me. Severed is a first-person dungeon crawler with touchscreen combat. Immediately feel put off by the very mention of touch controls? Don't be. Along with fast-paced gameplay, Severed offers something fresh. For me, it was the gruesome world brought to life by its unique presentation, the striking female lead, and the focus on a strong core mechanic. Severed is exactly what I look for. You play as Sasha, a one-armed girl who mysteriously awakens in an unknown land. After some brief exploration, you're entrusted a sword and learn that your family is scattered throughout the area. The plot motivation is for you to recover them. Exploration and combat is done completely in first person, and there's no break between dungeon and battle scenes. In combat, swiping the touchscreen swings your sword. Short and long slashes are commonplace, but the true depth of the gameplay is found in utilizing the right ability. Sasha can stun enemies, devour their magic buffs, or unleash her own inner rage. Monsters can also appear from multiple sides at once. The first-person perspective forces you to only view one enemy at a time, so you must have complete situational awareness. It's not uncommon to have a situation where you parry one enemy's attack in front of you, then focus your true strength on the enemy to your right while the other recovers. Stunning foes with magic and stealing the right power-up aid this process. To top it off, everything is neatly presented on screen along with distinct audio cues to guide you. Personally, I really enjoyed the battle system. I appreciate when a game develops and focuses on a core mechanic, and Severed does just that. There's no fluff. From upgrades to abilities, everything you do is about slashing up your foes, and when the game's called Severed, that's pretty appropriate. So you might be worried, does this core mechanic ever get stale? Because if it does, then there's not much of a game left. The answer is no. It's true that my patience was wearing thin by the end of the final dungeon, but it's the exploration element between battles that helps prevent any repetition. Dungeons are elaborate, yet it never gets dull to look in every nook and cranny to find just one more pot to break. In other games I've played, I find it pretty hard to keep up the amount of thorough exploration I have when I first start. It often becomes too monotonous and yields weak results. However, in Severed, I'm constantly interested by the world, which makes the exploration much more interesting. The pacing is also great because the puzzles are never too demanding, and you don't have to worry about random encounters messing up your vibes. The streamlined gameplay mechanics also make it fun to upgrade Sasha's level. Once you've hacked off enough enemy limbs, again with that core theme, it's easy to compare the upgrades you want, maybe transmogrify an item, and then power up. For me, the difficulty was consistent throughout the whole game. The developer, Drinkbox Studios, clearly put a lot of time into balancing their mechanics. My only notable critique is that I wish there were more types of enemies to face. You fight the same monsters over and over again. Severed attempts to switch things up by introducing magic buffs, or maybe you need to break some rocks off their weak points, but it's not enough. Once you understand the pattern behind a certain monster, you sort of get into that groove every time you face them. Seeing some more fresh faces would have been nice. On to the visuals, which is easily the aspect that'll draw gamers' attention the most. Severed's presentation is built to stand out. The aesthetic relies on the use of deeply saturated colors and disturbing imagery. Every artwork or screenshot I've seen of Severed is pretty grotesque. There's usually a hacked off arm or a badass shot of Sasha wearing this elaborate armor. So you mix those disturbing symbols with this saturated color palette and it just makes the visuals pop. I think this is apparent as you play through the game too. Everything is so colorful yet terrifying, and it just builds this beautiful place that you would never actually want to find yourself in. The audio holds up just as well too, and I recommend using headphones for your whole playthrough. Hearing sound effects better will give you an advantage in battle. Remember that you can only view one enemy at a time, but when an enemy to your left is about to attack, you can hear its audio cue in your left earphone and act accordingly. And the great music fits the atmosphere perfectly. My favorite track plays when you're exploring your destroyed home. It's somber, it's eerie, and we should really take a quick listen. It gives the vibe that something terrible has happened there. I also suggest keeping your ears open during the battle and boss music, as they're equally impressive. There's a lot I have to say about Severed's story, its ending in particular, so much so that I'm going to dedicate the last portion of this podcast to just that. However, I'll give a spoiler-free impression first, wrap things up with a final recommendation, then play some music so anybody planning to pick up the game can click away. Severed's story is minimalistic, and I find that great. This is just personal preference, but I like as little hand-holding as possible in narratives, meaning I like to fill in the blanks with my own imagination, or to discover story elements myself through gameplay. Being able to project parts of yourself into a story is something that I think video games do very well. Severed gives the player a roadmap for the narrative. There's a beginning, you have an objective, and there's an ending. But so many aspects are left up to the player to imagine. The world you're in, as well as how Sasha ended up there, are both left a mystery. Sasha is also a silent protagonist, so her thoughts are uniquely the player's. And then there's the ending, but I won't talk about that here. I love this kind of storytelling because it feels complete, but it allows me to think about the world even after I've put it down. And I just gotta do a quick shout out to Drinkbox Studios for creating Sasha. Thank you guys for developing a female lead who's non-sexualized and non-white. I can't fit into this talk how much I appreciate this representation. Sasha is wonderful and easily my favorite character in recent memory. You dudes rock. So, if you haven't played Severed and are still listening to this podcast, then you must be interested in the game. If you're interested in the game, then I recommend you play it. I personally really enjoyed it. To give you an idea how much I liked it, well, I play a lot of games, from AAA multiplayer titles like Overwatch to obscure visual novels like Zero Time Dilemma. I play them all. Severed is my favorite game yet this year. And it doesn't stop there. I liked it so much that I worry if the big releases I'm looking forward to this fall will top it. Will Final Fantasy XV and The Last Guardian give me the impact that Severed gave me? Will I feel as connected to Noctis as I did with Sasha? Will The Last Guardian's gameplay come together like Severed's? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised, or mind, if the answer is no. That's it for me, guys. Thanks for listening. I hope my talk was clear and meaningful. If you've beaten Severed, stick around for my musings on the game's ending and world. If not, I hope you look into the game. Either way, see you here next time. Bye. Alright, let's talk story. Earlier, I said that the plot motivation is to recover Sasha's family. It's more correct to say that you're recovering their bodies. Severed's world is brutal and its story isn't any lighter. Sasha discovers one by one that her family has been killed, and it's not like she's able to share a few final words with them or anything. You find them dried up with a weird fungus growing out of their eyes. But Sasha continues to live. By the end of the game, the goal of rescuing your family is long gone. Your only ambition is to give them a proper burial. For closure, really. The dragon, Severed's final boss and the ruler of the land, steals their bodies. So you fight, and win, but now all you're left with is their corpses. It doesn't bring them back. How could it? Severed's story is about losing a loved one and learning to let go. Sasha does succeed in burying their bodies, and with that, she's able to move on. Maybe this isn't as unique and interesting as I think it is, but I like the idea of a video game character fighting for the chance at closure. It's sad, and it's keeping it real. What's interesting to note is the Wanderer's role in the story. Let me remind you, the Wanderer also lost someone she loved, but she still keeps his body in a basket strapped to her back. She wasn't strong enough to overcome the pain. She literally carries it with her. And when you discover this, you pity her and her weakness. She seems to represent who Sasha will become if she doesn't let go of her family's death. True to the rest of the game, very little is explained about the ending. Sasha has two choices after she defeats the dragon. She can remain in the tormented land, or she can return to her true home. What is odd about calling it her true home is that the game opens with you exploring an area called home. It seems to be where your family used to live. There's a family portrait on the wall, and it's also where Sasha brings their bodies back to. If that place doesn't represent home, I'm not sure what a true home could be. Regardless, whether Sasha remains in that land or returns to her true home remains a mystery, as the game purposely closes before we see her decision. The caped creature that guides you through your journey also mentions that others have been forced to face the same hardships. I don't think that Sasha remains in that land. Severed's themes are about moving on, and we've seen what happens to those who remain with the Wanderer. So in order to be thematically consistent, Sasha has to move on to the next chapter of her life. The ending forces you to think about not only what lies ahead, but about the land you explored throughout the game. Where are you? Sasha awakens after being attacked. She doesn't seem to have any knowledge of the land, and areas appear new to her. So her family, and her house were all transported there. It's a real mystery how her entire home was moved. This is my theory, and maybe I'm getting way into the themes of the story. Sasha is an avatar for you, the player. After all, she's a silent protagonist. Your thoughts are hers. The game world, where Severed takes place, represents your own fears of death and loss. At the end, the doorway that leads to your true home is you, the player, returning to the real world after you've beaten the game. So Severed is essentially the player's nightmare of losing someone important. To me, this makes a lot of sense. It's the only way to explain how Sasha, her family, and their literal home end up in this world. It also gives an explanation for what the true home could be. Sasha's family represents someone you're afraid to lose, and the open decision at the end asks whether or not you'll be able to move on after losing them. It's crazy, it's meta, I know, I'm thinking way too hard. But I will say this. Whether or not it was intentional, because the narrative's theme is about losing and letting go of a loved one, this entire game world is inspired from that emotion and process. For that reason, it really connected with me. Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the game as much as I did, and tell me what you think in the comments below. See ya.